Hi there, and welcome to this free webinar. My name is Erik Seibesma, and I'm one of the leading NLP trainers in the Netherlands. And gosh, I feel so excited today because we have a chat conversation with NLP Master Trainer John Overdurf about the upcoming NLP Trainers Training from September 14th till October 2nd. And we thought, wouldn't it be nice when John is actually going to tell you something about the upcoming training? And well, in this case, I'm sure he has a lot of other stuff to say. And I asked Karen, my wife, she's also a member of the NLP Academy here in the Netherlands, is to have a chat with John. So just listen in, have fun, and I'll talk to you later.
And your trainers training in Holland in September this year. And we are also very honored to have this interview with you. So our listeners can get an impression of what they can expect when they participate in the trainers training in September. And also this interview is for the listeners who have not heard about you yet, and it will be an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. So, John, to start with an icebreaker and to get warmed up a little bit, can you tell us about you, about your hobbies or interests or who you are?
Well, sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, I just want to thank you and Eric for even thinking about inviting me over. And I'm really excited about doing this. I've been teaching in Holland really pretty consistently for, since around, I'd say about 1994 or so.
Wow.
And have never done a trainer's training there, though. So I'm really looking forward to doing this one, and I'm making some adjustments to mix it up a little bit, so it's a little bit different from the one that I do at home, so that your folks will be getting something unique as well.
Oh, perfect. That's great.
Well, my background, my background is in psychology, and that's still really a passion in my life. I was one of those folks that got kind of lucky. I started off going to college. I thought I was going to be a musician in a rock band. And my parents weren't all that keen on me doing that. And I got lucky and took a psych course, I think my freshman year in college, and fell in love with it. And really just continued to pursue it, in different ways. That was back in, I guess my first job was around 1979 or so. Working at a hospital. So right now, what am I interested in? I love to ride bike in the desert, trail riding. I'm passionate about music. I've been playing guitar on and off for, I don't know, since I was about 15 or so. Love recording things. Do a lot of recording for all my products. I like to make my own original music for all the products that I do.
Oh, wow.
And I like doing all the sound engineering and that sort of stuff. That stuff has always been kind of fun for me. So really, I've been one of those guys that I guess you could say I never really followed the norm that much. So I kind of do what interests me and follow whatever thread that is until I've learned everything I feel that is useful for me or the folks that I might be teaching. And then I kind of move on to the next thread. So right now, I've been spending a lot of time. I just did a practitioner training actually just last week called the Practical Practitioner, which was really re-chunking and sequencing all of the traditional practitioner material, but in light of all the neuroscience that's out there now, which sometimes points out some issues I think that our field has had about what really works and why it works and so forth. And that was a lot of fun. And I do a lot of work. Probably the main metaphors I use these years for teaching and so forth is either my own experience living my own life, or of course all the new neuroscience, which has just kind of exploded really over about the last, I don't know, maybe 10, especially last, I would say 10 years, but it's really been kind of, the wave was forming about 15 years ago. And I think it can really inform what we're doing in such a deeper way than what we had before. And a lot of those principles are incorporated actually into the trainers training that we're going to be doing.
Okay.
Part of what I like to do is I'll be doing a lot of segments. They'll be pretty well integrated into the actual schedule itself. But anybody who does even the first 12 days and does not take the evaluation, I'm still going to certify them in brain-based teaching and leadership.
Wow.
So that they have at least some sort of credential like that. And it could well be these days that talking about brain-based teaching, training, leadership might even be a better entry for folks getting into, especially if they want to do corporate work, than I think even NLP does.
Wow, that sounds really, really interesting. We will get further on in the interview, we will have some questions for you about the evaluation part of the trainer's training as well. But this is a cool introduction. Thank you very much for that. John, can you tell me a little bit about what your first experience was with NLP, since you are doing this for so many years now?
Well, I was originally, when I got out of college, I worked first at a hospital where we worked. I had to go down and do evaluations with people in the emergency room to basically find out if they were psychotic or if it was a drug or alcohol toxicity issue, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And then, and at that time, it made me very, very acutely aware of the fact that I had learned very little in college, at the university, in terms of really how to work with people. I mean, that was complete getting thrown in the deep end, working with that population. And my second job, I was working at a mental health clinic, and I was working with what we call dually diagnosed clients who had usually, at that time, like a major psychiatric diagnosis, along with a major substance abuse or alcohol diagnosis. So the people that I were working with were really, many of them had histories of abuse. Many of them had, just all kinds of issues. It certainly was different than the kind of coaching stuff that people talk about nowadays. And so what was happening was, through kind of a bunch of fortunate accidents, I guess you would say, I found myself in private practice. I had a pretty full caseload of folks. And I really wondered, Karen, if what I was doing really made any difference at all. I was seeing people every week, the same people sometimes for very long periods of time. And I'll never forget, this actually happened. I was sitting in my office in between clients one day, and I was thinking to myself, if you had issues, would you go to see somebody like you?
Yeah.
And I really couldn't give myself a straight answer on that as far as a yes. It was more like a no. I don't think I would. And so I started looking for training, postgraduate training that I could get so that I would, feel better about the work I was doing and be more effective. And, did some stuff with Gestalt that was kind of some local people, and also did a good bit with family therapy. And through the family therapy training, I started hearing about this cat named Milton Erickson.
Ah.
And so I started reading some books on Erickson, and have to admit they were all the original works with him and Ernest Rossi. I still wasn't familiar with NLP yet. And, I would read the books and I would be just completely mystified. I really would have almost zero clue what was happening there. I kind of got that there was something significant going on, but in terms of really being able to replicate it, that wasn't really happening. So I got interested in hypnosis training, and all my original training before it became more obviously NLP training was Ericksonian training. So I did a number of trainings with different trainers, and probably the one that really did it for me was I was being trained by this guy. He's now since passed on, but really mystical Ericksonian guy, trained directly with Erickson. And I had, and this is going to sound a little cheesy and a little hokey, but it's really true. He was just doing a closing induction. It was maybe the second day of a 5-day training. And what I usually tell people is that if it would have been in a church, I would have thought that I had like a spiritual experience or a religious conversion. It was just one of those things where I just felt the expansiveness of everything, and a lot of like this overwhelming sense of love. It was just amazing. And it was kind of like that training showed me the top of the mountain. You know, it was like, wow.
Was that the
I,
missing part of the puzzle? Because you were missing something when you were working in your private practice. And
I was passionate about it. I was learning a lot. I was really a student of the game. I'd go home every night and I'd read books and I'd try and figure out how to work with different clients, but I didn't really have the how-to down, in my opinion. And then this training that I was just mentioning, it showed me the top of the mountain, but when I got back to my office, I still wasn't sure how to make that climb myself, I guess would be the best way to put it.
yeah,
So I continued to take more training, and it so happened that one of the people that I was training with in Ericksonian work ended up getting certified as an NLP trainer. And he used NLP as a way to structure a lot of the exercises so that it was easier to understand, I guess you would say, the how-tos. And that's when the breakthrough happened for me. You know, I really started to understand because I had so much experience working with all kinds of people that were, you know, pretty challenging folks to work with. And now all of a sudden, I have ways of working with these people where I'm getting results.
wow,
Which was shocking because it wasn't like I was working with a senior manager in a company who has some anxiety around getting up and presenting in front of 20 people. It was a much dealing with people who were suicidal, people who were sometimes actively psychotic, actively in addictions, actively in abusive relationships, things like that. So that was kind of the convincer, because I thought to myself, you know, if you can get results with these people, then this stuff, there's something to this stuff, you know. And that's what kind of unfolded my path in terms of a career, because I started to be known in the area that I lived in, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. People who didn't know what to do with the most difficult clients started referring them to me.
wow,
And then the progression kind of happened where I did, you know, I'm not saying every single person I worked with was like this huge success or anything like that, but it was markedly different than what a lot of other people were experiencing. I'll put it that way. And pretty soon, the people that had referred their clients to me, therapists, psychologists, social workers, people like that, psychiatrists, they started coming to me for therapy.
wow. That's good to hear.
Yeah, it was an interesting progression how that whole thing happened.
Very, very nice to hear that. Also, that in the beginning you didn't have always a 100% success rate. Sometimes when people start out with NLP and it doesn't work, they get a little bit, how do you say, not frustrated, but maybe a little bit disappointed.
Yeah.
But what is your advice for those people?
Well, I think anything that is really worth what they say it's worth. The bottom line is that it's not going to be something that you're going to be able to learn overnight.
No.
I mean, it certainly shortens the learning curve, and I can tell you that, you know, having more of a traditional academic background, what NLP has to offer with people in terms of, you know, how to assist somebody making changes, just as one thing, not to mention just how to really just make your life much richer and more fulfilling.
Yeah.
It's so much more than anything that I ever learned in school. And I thought what I learned in school was valuable, but this just, at that time in my life, it was just like opening up to a whole new world. So for me, the way I look at it is, the only way you can't get really good is if you don't practice.
Exactly.
But if you practice and you continue working with it and you get good supervision so that as you're practicing, you're learning,
Yeah.
and realizing that making the mistakes are, you know, a mistake's never really a total mistake unless we pick up our toys and go home and say, I'm not playing anymore, you know? So for me, as long as you stay in the game, it's really just a matter of time.
Yes.
And I usually tell people, I mean, I'm a pretty much, I don't do a lot of hype when it comes to this stuff. I mean, if people ask me and I say, well, if you're starting from scratch and you've not taken a practitioner training, you know, I would say you need to really give yourself a couple years where you're actually working with people actively to get to the point where you're not having to think about so much what you're doing. You know, it's happened. It's coming more from your unconscious behavior, and it is more second nature.
I agree with you completely. So what made you basically decide to become a trainer of NLP?
Well, it was weird. I never set out to do that. I really just set out to be the best therapist I could be. And when I got to the point, kind of almost really picking up from that last thing I was mentioning about, I started getting all these people who had been referring their clients to me. They were starting to come to me for therapy. And then what happened was when they started getting the results that they liked, they said, well, you teach us how to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
And at the time I was assisting a lot with one of my early mentors, a guy named Ron Klein. And he asked me to come on and be a trainer for him. So I started teaching, I don't know when that would have been, probably in the mid 80s, I guess, somewhere in there. And through a kind of a series of incidents, he wasn't really in a position to be able to certify me as a trainer, but he had introduced me to Wyatt Woodsmall. And he and Wyatt were friends, and Wyatt had done some of the training and had taken an interest in me. So he said, hey, why don't you come take this trainer's training that we're doing? That was in 1989. And that was back in the day. It was Richard Bandler, and Wyatt, and Tad James, and a guy named Marvin Oka, and a guy from England named Eric Robbie. We're all doing it. So I just went there mainly because it just seemed like the next step. I had already started to teach people, and I'd been running supervision groups for therapists for probably, at that point, for probably close to 3 years. So it was just kind of the next logical step.
Okay. So you were quite hooked on the NLP techniques and all the results you got from it. And so what's driving you to teach NLP after so many years as of today?
Well, if I'm going to be 100% honest, and there's no reason not to be, I don't really see what I'm teaching now as exclusively NLP, although most people associate what I teach with NLP. So in other words, what my fiance Kirsten says I do is she said, you just teach what you do.
Okay.
And so what's happened is that I feel like I looked back, originally like at John and Richard's work, and kind of having the background that I did, when I would read their books, for example, and look in the reference section, which were books that weren't sourced in terms of footnotes, but they were just kind of background sources that they felt like they wanted to include, as, kind of showing you what the background was of their thinking. I went back and I read all those books. And that kind of turned me on to a lot of other ideas that were not necessarily being taught in your standard NLP trainings, but certainly were part of John and Richard's consciousness at the time when NLP was created. And then all that did was that led me into, I spent a lot of years exploring, back in the 80s and 90s when all the quantum mechanical metaphors, applying them to consciousness was kind of the rage. I spent a long time, really delving into that, and I'm pretty well known. I mean, there's a lot of models that I've developed over the years that a lot of people teach worldwide. So I've always felt like that part of being a trainer is really being a researcher and a developer. And that's probably what keeps me rolling more than anything. And I still work with clients on a regular basis. So I kind of feel like to really be doing what I'm doing and to have the background that I think one ought to have if they're teaching people how to do things is I ought to be doing, I ought to be coaching, I ought to be doing therapy also on an ongoing basis to stay current with that. So I continue to do all that stuff and got really interested in all the neuroscience stuff. And in general, what I like to do is I look for metaphors in science and other areas that are really outside the field of NLP. And what I find really, really useful and exciting about NLP is NLP, once you really get this stuff installed, it's in your brain, it's like it gives you like an amazing set of skills to be able to step outside of NLP, look at other fields, look at other things, and then bring them back in using the structure of NLP to be able to explain it to people, to be able to break it down into a training design that makes sense and works, so that you can really be, expanding way beyond what all the original skill sets were that were, say, taught in practitioner or master practitioner training. And that's pretty much what keeps me going now. I mean, I do something called Telecoaching You, which I won't get into all the details, but I'll just say this part. I've been doing it for, I guess it's 11 or 12 years now.
Oh.
And when I first started, my fiance Kirsten was the person that said, you ought to start doing all this stuff on the phone and do teleconferencing, and you can get people from all over the world. And I said, this is a great idea, let's do it. And we set up our first 3-month block with people. And see, I had all this content because I had never done these classes before. So I easily had 3 months of content that I could, every month I could teach something new to these people. Well, lo and behold, what happens is at the end of that 3 months, everybody that was in those classes said, well, are you going to do another 3 months? And at that point I go, oh my God, I don't have any material, So what started to happen was I made the commitment to everybody that I would come up with something new, or at least new to me, unique, in my model of the world, every month.
And this is about also where you talk about your research and your development, or is this
Exactly, because see, what it's done is every month I'm teaching roughly 6 hours of classes, where the expectation is I'm going to bring new stuff to the table.
Okay.
And so what happened, 11 years ago or wherever it was, I've continued to do that pretty much 10 months out of the year, some years more, some a little bit less, but almost like really on the average about 10 months out of the year, I have to come up with new stuff every month.
Wow. And these are new methods or new
Yep.
techniques? And
a lot of new linguistic models. I mean, we've covered everything. We've done athletic performance. The coaching model that I teach is much richer than it used to be. It's got lots and lots of ways of working with people. But what I want to do, my acid test when I teach people how to coach, is if it doesn't fly in business, if you can't do it conversationally in a business context, then it's not refined well enough. Because coming from a therapy background like I did, you can take great liberties. You can do things that really look very techniquey, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
And clients don't really mind that. They kind of expect it in some cases. Whereas to be able to use hypnotic principles, let's say, but in more of a corporate kind of environment, if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. So that's always kind of been my acid test for refining things. So I've done that. I've developed a lot of different linguistic models over the years. Beyond Words is a pretty well-known one, and then some of the newer ones, attention shifting coaching, all around how to use linguistics as the chief intervention. Done lots on consulting for Telecoaching You, all kinds of things. I'm working right now in the area of what's called embodied cognition, which essentially explains at a much deeper level where submodalities come from, why they work, and which ones are going to work the best. So that's kind of been the thread I've been following over maybe the last year or so, is exploring all that stuff and then kind of developing new techniques that kind of look like submodality techniques. Certainly you could look at it through that lens, but are really as a result of outside research.
Sounds really, really interesting. And I'm sure that people can find more information about that on your website as well.
Yep, if they want, or they can email me. Yep.
Perfect. So we've talked about the drive you have to teach NLP for so many years, but what basically is your mission? Is that also to research and develop based on the NLP techniques, or is that something different?
Well, at this point, having done it for, I don't know how many years, I guess I started, my first trainer's training that I taught was 1990. So, for me, it's really about helping people be all of who they are.
Yeah.
That's really the bottom line, and for me, the thing that's really fun is, to be a teacher, and I have always kind of thought of myself more as a teacher than a trainer. For me, there's a little bit of a distinction there, I think. And see, to me, the mark of a really good teacher, in fact, the mission of a teacher, is to have the students exceed the teacher in the areas that are important for them to pursue. Yeah. So see, to me, that's kind of the bottom line, is I want people to go way further than I have, at least in the areas that are interesting to them. Yes. So that they can make their own unique contribution whether it's to NLP or to business or to just helping people live better lives or just living their own lives, in a more effective, productive, richer, fulfilling kind of way. So for me, that's kind of I really enjoy the research part of it for sure. That's what kind of really gets me going. And probably the top of the hierarchy is I love working with people. So I love coaching. I don't foresee ever not doing that.
No.
I don't really buy the retirement of it. Why would I want to retire from something that I love? So that's always been something that's been a major thread that I've done, and I'm sure I'll continue to do. And in that way, then I feel like I'm having a positive effect. Throwing a stone out there that creates ripples. And like I like to say, you never know how far a change will go. And that's part of what inspires me, is finding out how far out those ripples go, not for me, but maybe just from the people that I interacted with and then the people they interact with, and how that just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, perfect. That sounds great. And I hope that you really do. It sounds like you still have got that curiosity element, which every NLPer should still have.
Oh, yeah.
You are living proof of that. That's really nice to hear. So, to talk about something else that you do, you also developed humanistic NLP.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about the humanistic NLP and what the difference is with regular NLP?
Sure. It's really, for me, it marks an era. So I kind of feel like, if I'm really honest, I've outgrown that label. I still certify people in it because for some people that's important, but I kind of feel like that would be a box that would be kind of limited if I kept trying to put everything inside of that, just like if I tried to put everything else inside of NLP.
Yeah.
But how it started was in the 90s. At the time, my wife, the relationship I was in then, we were doing a lot of work together. And for me personally, around that period, that's when I was most interested in a lot of the quantum mechanical metaphors. And to kind of put a little bit of a historical perspective, one of the things that I had known, because I had really gotten to see really every major trainer, in the 80s, that anybody would probably want to see at conferences and doing trainings with them and stuff. And one of the things that I always noticed was that even though they talked about NLP as being more about being pragmatic, and it's much more of a how-to and not necessarily an ideology or anything like that, all those people that would talk about that always had, whether you want to use the word metaphysical or let's just say they had epistemological interests that were way beyond just NLP. Whether it was people like John Grinder studying, shamanistic practices, or Richard would do the same thing, or, when I was working a lot with Tad, being involved in Huna, the Hawaiian psychology / spiritual tradition. And I was always interested in Eastern philosophy and all of the contemplative traditions. I started meditating when I was doing TM and stuff at a very early age, did yoga when I was 15. So I was always interested in all this other stuff, but I wasn't necessarily trying to integrate it into NLP or anything like that. But then when I started to hear all these other people having these other interests, it was interesting that the students that we would have, if we did a good job with them, a lot of times they'd say, well, NLP is really about expanding possibility, and now having learned what we've learned at, say, practitioner or master practitioner level, this was the mantra we were hearing from students. They would say, well, what's beyond NLP?
Yeah.
Is this it? John, are you saying this is, this is as far as you can chunk up, or maybe there's something else going on here? So, and at the time, the New Age movement was kind of big, and I thought there were some nice things about that, but I also thought there were some things that weren't so useful about all that. So for me, a lot of the quantum mechanical principles at that time, this would have been in the early 90s, for me, mapped across, it wasn't a map across, they bridged kind of where NLP was at with something that some people could call maybe more spiritual, if you want to use that word. Something certainly beyond what we can conceive. And so I liked using all the quantum mechanical metaphors with that. and kind of combined that with the work of Abe Maslow, who was, certainly one of the forerunners in humanistic psychology, who believed, the simple question, the simple answer to why are we here, the way he answered it was to self-actualize. So to be all of who we are, and then of course to realize that all of who we are is far more than what we could ever think we are at any given point in time. And to understand our connectedness to all other things, those kinds of like much bigger concepts. So that's really what we were going for with HNLP at the time. It was a way to kind of help people think about what's beyond NLP, still use NLP to do work and to even chunk and sequence some of the stuff that you could learn like in the quantum physics world that, and again, they're just metaphors. I'm not saying that's all fact. And it was a way of opening people up to something greater than themselves. I never really there was an era back then where I was teaching stuff that some people would call more spiritual, and I kind of stopped doing that because I really felt like I didn't want to be proselytizing. I didn't want to be preaching. I kind of felt like I wanted people to find their way themselves. I wanted to give them some ways of opening up and considering more possibilities, and then if they end up going in that direction, they end up going in that direction. But that wasn't necessarily my mission or the purpose of any of the trainings or anything like that. So that was really, for me, what HNLP was about at that time.
So can you give a practical example how you embedded the Eastern philosophy and maybe your yoga as well in the humanistic NLP?
Sure. So a really good example is probably it's a language model that people have taught under other names. It started off, I like the term beyond words because it was how can you use language to transcend itself, which is very much like in Buddhism, what a koan, a K-O-A-N, a koan is. It's a way where a teacher asks a question to a student which helps them understand the limitations of conceptualization and the limitations of language. Probably the most famous Zen koan would be, what's the sound of one hand clapping? And so for me, learning nonlinear language patterns was a way that you could create the same effect with a person, but you could do it therapeutically in a focused kind of way. That came totally from my background in studying Buddhism and a lot of those kind of meditative and contemplative practices. Another process that I've done a lot with over the years is foreground-background shifting. And that came, I could even tell you the book it came from, the teachings of Huang Po, where essentially the whole purpose of the book, I read that when I was an undergraduate in philosophy, that was about, if you look at like a vase, that it is defined as much by the space as it is its form. So a lot of that kind of thinking about kind of looking beyond the obvious form and stuff, that played a lot in the development of HNLP. There were a lot of specific techniques. I added a perceptual position beyond the first three. We did a lot of stuff back in the day around accelerated learning that had to do with incorporating a lot of practices like that, but applying them into a learning situation. In fact, I just finished up a book not too long ago with some students of mine on deep trance identification, and a lot of that stuff that was my contribution was actually the stuff I was doing back in the 90s. They're kind of interested in it now, but I gave them all my stuff. And that was all really from that era also.
Interested, very interested. And do you have a book tip for people who want to know more about the humanistic NLP?
Well, the book will probably never be written, or it's going to be written by other people, I think, because it's one of those things where, if you walk far enough down the path past the city you were in, you don't really always feel like going back to that city to try and write it all down.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of at that point. I could say, maybe not so much in book form, but I've got lots and lots of stuff on audio and video that certainly addresses all of those processes and stuff. In terms of other people's work, I would just say do a search, because a lot of my students over the years have written papers on HNLP, and have expanded it in their way. So they might be as good a source as I would ever be
Yeah.
for, what's happening right now with all that.
Okay, that's a valuable tip. And do we find something of the NLP back into the trainers training?
Yes.
Okay.
So, see, for me, trainers training is pretty much a culmination. Every training I do, I try to make it as up to date in terms of where I'm at and what is, within reason, if it's appropriate for the class, kind of the newest thing that for me, I think is really important, so that it shortens people's learning curve, so that, they can know things that it might have taken me 30 years to figure out, they can know in the third year of doing NLP.
Yeah.
So for me, I like being out on the edge like that, and if I think it's appropriate to the training, and certainly at trainers training it is, uh, there's going to be a lot of new stuff that I think people will easily be able to, if they look at it through the lens of NLP, they could use NLP to describe what we're doing. But they will say, yeah, I didn't learn this in any of my NLP training. I'm pretty confident about that. There's a lot of training techniques that I've developed over the years that, at least from what people tell me, I don't really pay too much attention to what other people do. I really don't. So if you would ask me how what I'm doing compares to other people, I would have to say I don't know, because I don't really look inside the field very much, to be honest with you. But from what people have told me, uh, you know, um, I've over the years I get a lot of people that have already been trained as NLP trainers that want to take trainers training with me because they know it's a different approach. There's certainly some things that are familiar that they'll notice, but for me, it's really all about how do you format the unconscious mind, and it's all about uh, how do you use conversational hypnotic principles, not necessarily fancy language patterns all the time. Certainly, you can't sound like Erickson and speak like a low, gravelly voice if you're working with a bunch of senior managers.
No.
So you have to be able to know how to employ all those things so that the people that are coming to the trainings have the best chance of learning that stuff as quickly as possible and as deeply as possible, and are inspired and motivated to actually get better and better over time.
Well, that sounds
Uh,
great. And also, of course, how they can use that in a corporate environment.
yeah, and that's the one. See, to me, that's still the main untapped place for most people. That if they're NLP trainers, is really how to really get involved at that level.
Yes.
So one of the things I started doing with my trainers training over the last couple of years, I actually changed the title. It was called Hypnotically Presenting Yourself, and then I added kind of the subscript, The Art of Uncommon Leadership, because I've had the opportunity to do, it's this, well, let's just say my fair share of working with leaders in business and in the corporate world. And to put it bluntly, they love this stuff. And if you combine it with neuroscience, you get no pushback whatsoever. So for me, what I've been doing with focusing trainers training, I don't want it to just be about, okay, you're taking this training so you can learn how to do, say, a practitioner training or a master practitioner training. I want people to be able to have the scope to do any kind of training for any group of people, and particularly to take it beyond the kind of training that most people think of in NLP. So what I mean by that is, how do you work with a group of people over time, keep them motivated, keep them on purpose?
Yeah.
So for example, let's say you're called in to a company and you're working with a group of project managers who have to motivate people over time, maybe 6, 12 months over a period of time where they've got to motivate a group of people. They have to inspire them. They have to structure and create a division of labor so that they create a synergy in the team. So it's how do you work with teams? And that's going to be there's going to be a number of days specifically around how do you actually do that? How do you take what we know about hypnotic principles and some of the NLP ideas and processes, and how do you apply that to working as a consultant to increase the effectiveness of a team over time? So that'll be, probably I'll have some special segments on that, but that'll be a pretty important thread that goes through the whole training, actually.
That sounds really useful. I think a lot of people might be benefit with that. So that brings me also a little bit of the next question. What kind of people should attend your NLP trainers training? What characteristics do they have, or yeah, who are
Well,
they?
well, I want to create as great a training for you guys as I possibly can. My own value system, when I do my own trainers trainings, for example, I'm not interested in big numbers. I'm interested in the right people. I'm interested in people that are doing it. I mean, it's great to make money and all that kind of stuff, but I'm kind of looking for people that have lots more going on than just that, and who have a true curiosity, and they're dedicated, they're diligent, they want to learn, they realize this is a process and it's all about, having their lives be a rich process, and it's not a race to see who can get to become a master trainer before the next,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And for people who are really interested in taking the skill set and applying it to whatever area they would want in their life, whatever group of people. It doesn't have to be that they're out doing practitioner or master practitioner trainings. In fact, in some ways, I'm not 100% sure that, I mean, that format really has limited applicability when you think of the whole world, and what people are looking for. People have to become more creative about how they package this stuff and how they present it to people and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So the kind of folks I like, I like people who don't take themselves too seriously. I certainly don't take myself too seriously. They're open to making mistakes
Yeah.
and picking themselves up and taking the next step. Um, if you're interested in having fun, if you're interested in being all of who you can be in front of a group of people, and see, to me, that's the deal. It's like where each training you end up doing, it becomes a transformative experience for you, the trainer, too,
Yes.
because you're comfortable with putting yourself on the edge. If you want the students to be on the edge of their map, how the hell can we expect them to do that if we're not willing to do that ourselves?
Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of, I like that kind of spirit. In terms of skill sets, I think, when I was looking at other people's trainers training back in the day, it was always obvious to me that fundamentally what trainers training really is the application of mostly, I've expanded it, but if you look at most trainers trainings, it's really the application of practitioner level skills, but to a group of people rather than, doing it with one person, let's say.
Yes. Yeah.
So for me, that's kind of the minimum requirement. I let people, if they don't want to be certified, I let people who are, maybe they're corporate trainers, maybe they're teachers in a school system, or maybe do training in some other kind of capacity. They're never really interested in maybe doing an NLP kind of format, but they understand the power and the versatility of these skills. And so, if they have a practitioner background, I'll say, hey, come to the training, and do the first 2 weeks, because, you'll be better off for it if you do.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one, by the way, because not only the master practitioners can participate, but also practitioners who would like to deepen their knowledge can
Sure.
join the first weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah, I've
good.
always felt comfortable with that. I mean, see, to me, being all of who you are in front of a group is probably one of the most important skills you can have.
Yeah.
Because if you can do it with a group, you can probably do it with individuals, and then it's about being real. Being who you really are, and by us as trainers doing that, that gives the people that are taking the trainings permission to do the same for themselves. And so to me, it's really about each person being all of who they are to create the kind of contribution that they can create that nobody else in the world could. And
Yeah.
it's like what I like to tell people usually the first day of the training is, it can only be about you being all of who you are, because even on your worst day, you're better at being you than anybody else.
Exactly.
So you might as well stick with you instead of trying to clone yourself into some famous person that you think is a great, that you want to be like, because that's not where your specialty is going to be. Your specialty is going to be, having people experience NLP or whatever it is that you're teaching through your filters, through your life experience. And that's going to resonate with certain people that it wouldn't any other way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also good that you said that it's a safe environment for people to really learn during the trainer's training, and also that there's room for mistakes or whatever, so that they can feel really safe in a learning environment.
Oh yeah, and see, the thing that's important for me is I kind of run. You know, a lot of people are probably familiar with the format of trainer's training, where you have people in small groups and they're presenting to small groups. But I mix it up quite a bit. I don't just have the same group of people meeting with the same group of 5 or 6 or whatever it happens to be. I like to mix it up a lot,
Okay.
and I like to do what I call real-time coaching with people, which is, actually getting people's permission up front to be coached in the moment, to kind of step out of presenting something and step back into it after they get an idea or a suggestion or something like that, rather than waiting to give feedback at the end, which by then it's often too late. Even if you just do it right after they're done, it's still not going to have the same effect as being able to have a person step out for a moment, here are some other ideas, and then step right back in and get back on the horse and start to ride again, you know?
Exactly. So that means that you will be very active, listening to people and guiding them, and
I,
also looking at them
I
in the
will. I will
moment.
be circulating in all the groups, and I won't be just popping in and then popping out, and then you get to see me at the end or when I'm teaching the large group. I think the most powerful work takes place in the small groups, frankly.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I can't do all the groups simultaneously. It depends on the size of the training, but I really like to jump in and actually be with a group and see people go, through an entire presentation or something like that and work with them. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's pretty hands-on.
So besides the attention people can expect during the training, what else can they expect at the trainer's training?
Well, I think that they can a number of things. I think that they're gonna. I'm pretty sure that they're gonna rock. Their world's gonna get rocked. I'm
Right.
pretty sure about that. I'm pretty sure that when they leave that training, they're gonna go. Yeah, I have the same name, but I'm not the same me, in a good way. I think that I like to. I don't want to kind of show my hand yet because I'm still thinking about what I want to do with you guys, but. I always have some interesting, let's just put it this way, activities and metaphors that I like people to do to kind of expand their skills in a different sort of way.
Okay.
They can definitely expect some of what they would think is classic, but they'll be better off if they expect the unexpected, I think. Uh,
Right. I'm curious now.
Yeah, there's a lot of techniques, and they really are techniques. There's a lot of ways that I teach, a lot of processes that I use when I work with a group that, to my knowledge, I mean, unless people have trained with me, to my knowledge, is not common knowledge. In what I would call kind of the classic NLP field. So we'll be doing some of the things that I just need to do because it's some of the foundational kinds of things that people ought to be good at if they're going to say that they're a trainer. But really, we're going to be going way beyond that. Like a lot of people are really, well, you're going to do lots of storytelling and all that. Well, I'll do that, but what I usually say to people is, multi-embedded metaphors and nested loops are really cool, but they're highly overrated.
Yeah.
And I think that they have their place, but there are way more effective techniques than that employ hypnotic principles that are more powerful yet more subtle, and certainly have much wider scope in terms of the people that you're working with. So they can expect an awful lot of stuff. The question, how do you format the unconscious mind, is going to be a thread that runs through virtually, I would say, at least 80% of the class.
All right.
The other thing that I do is I usually spend, I would say, close to 2, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, actually, 2 days on how to do effective demos.
Yeah.
And usually what I say to people is, would you be interested in a way of setting up a demo so that you could be 100% confident that regardless of what technique you end up having to teach, you're going to be able to get a significant change with the person that you're working with.
Yeah.
And I'll be teaching that, all of that stuff, and that came from my experience with working with other people's trainers' trainings, and even my own back in the day, where we often, made doing a demo, an effective demo, part of the certification process. And, a lot of people would say, God, that was like a really powerful day. We learned so much. Why don't you add more of that into the training itself?
Yeah.
So, and for me, it works better because now people are, it's back to a learning process rather than an evaluation process. So they will have, been exposed to a lot of the processes that they potentially might have to demonstrate if they're going on to evaluation, actually in the training itself. And I like to do, I'll probably have some optional mornings where I'll show them some videos of things. I'll obviously do live stuff also for them, so that I think that's kind of a unique piece that I add. That, I would say that the demos, the heavy emphasis on hypnotic principles, the heavy emphasis on how do you work with groups over time, more like in terms of teams, and and basically showing them a whole different model for how to work with activities that most people in a corporate environment would say you need to have goals to do. I have a whole other model that I teach called Beyond Goals, which explains why goals don't work when they don't, and what does instead. And I'll be doing probably about 2 days on all of that in the second week of the training.
Okay. So basically that is all before the evaluation starts. So
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about what we can expect during the evaluation? What do we look at?
Well, basically, it should be a cruise for people. I mean, and when I say that, what I mean is that there's not going to be any surprises. They'll know what's coming. In the preparation material, which we can talk about in a little bit, they'll know ahead of time what we're looking for. So the evaluation it's 4 days. It's a written test that covers the classic information, not kind of spin-off things that people have developed, but I'm talking really about the classic information in NLP. I give people the classic manuals that I use. I use more current manuals also at my trainings, but I want them to see what the classic body is so that they know what that is, and everybody kind of has the same starting point. And they can use those as reference manuals if you want to think of it that way.
Okay.
So they've got the test, and since the way I've been doing the preparation for the test the last few years, to give you an example, last year the lowest grade I had out of 100%, and it depends on the person, but anywhere from, most people take 3 to 5 hours, I'd say, to do it. The lowest grade we had in the last class that I taught this past summer was, I think it was a 92%.
Wow, that's a high score.
Because I want people, see, I'm not trying to just check them out. I want them to learn the information, and I want them to have the information they need far enough in advance so that when they're going to take the test, they know the stuff. They're just writing the stuff out of their brain now. They weren't cramming the night before to try and remember stuff, which then after they take the test, 80% of it's gone. I want them to know the information so that when they go out and if they do a practitioner training, let's say after they leave, they don't have to go back and have to learn all the nitty-gritty details, because they will have already created a very solid content base for themselves. So that's the first day. Then the other 3 days, and this is kind of a traditional format, a lot of people do this. I was involved with probably the very first years when all this was developed back in the early 90s. So I do 2 presentations and then 1 day where a person needs to do a demo upon request. They won't know in advance what the demo is, but they'll know that it's going to be picked from a pool of, I think it's maybe a dozen demos that I give them up front. And they'll know that, way before they ever even come to the training, for that matter.
That's exciting. That's really exciting. So another question. When people enroll for the trainers training, do you have a little gift or bonus material for the people to get into this trainers training?
Well, with all humility, it's more than a little one.
Sounds good.
One of the things that I started doing a few years ago, kind of along the same spirit that I was trying to convey just earlier there where I was talking about, I want people to learn. I don't want this to just be like, well, we're all going to cram and then we're going to take this evaluation and, kind of eke it out and get certified and all that. I want people to really have a very solid foundation. So what I do is starting 4 weeks out from the first day of the class, the live class, I send out combinations of some are video, some are audio, some are written work or reading. It's not super extensive, but I do it. I send out 4 installments for the 4 weeks preceding the class to give them basic information so that we can move beyond some of that information in the training so that we're not having to spend a lot of that time in class. But also, for example, in the first installment, I have folks listen to a presentation I did that was a total off-the-cuff presentation. I thought it was going to be a networking group that I was meeting with that might have maybe 6 to 10 people, and word caught on, and it turned out to be, it was, I think, 89 people. And so I thought I was just going to be talking to people for, a little bit, and it turned out, I found out 2 days later there were 89 people showing up for this free presentation. And what they will hear in that is every single technique that they will learn in the training.
Okay.
And then what I like to do is, but I don't tell people what all those are because you got to come to the training for that.
Yes.
But then when they're done, what they'll be able to do is they'll go back and they'll be able to listen to that and they'll realize, wow, I know all those things he's doing now.
Perfect.
So there's a nice build up like that. I want to create some momentum for people so that when they get to the training itself, they really feel like the training's already started. It started 4 weeks ago. Now it's just the live training.
So they have a lot of time to prepare themselves and to learn a little bit what they can expect and to get into the trainer's training material already. That sounds really good.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So let me state again when the trainer's training will be held in the Netherlands. And if people want to find more information about the content of the training, they can go to our website, which is www.nlpacademie.nl. And if you go to the menu bar, you will find NLP opleiding. And there you will have the NLP trainers training section where you can find more detailed information about the training. The training starts at the 14th of December and ends at the 27th of December when you don't take the evaluation. And if you would like to join the evaluation, that starts from the 28th of September until the 2nd of October. So John, we've now reached already the end of this interview, and I really want to thank you. Thank you very much for all the information you have provided for us and the time you've given us. Really appreciate that. And on behalf of the NLP Academy and Erik Seibesma and myself, Karin Luijs, we appreciate it very much. And we love to welcome you to the Netherlands, and we're very much looking forward to it. So thank you very much, John.
Well, thank you, Karen. The feeling is very mutual. I can't wait to be with you guys in person. We're going to have a blast. To put it in my best Americanese, it's going to be awesome.
It really will be awesome. Thank you very much, John. See you
Thanks.
then.
See you.
See you.
Bye.
Hi there, it's Erik again. What a cool interview, wouldn't you think? Well, let me just tell you a little bit briefly about the details of the upcoming NLP Trainers Training, hypnotically presenting you. Because that's what it's all about, actually, hypnotically presenting. And the annual NLP Trainers Training is from September 14 up until September 27th, 2015. For the ones who are sticking to the evaluation is from September 29th till October 2nd, 2015. So for the complete course, including evaluation, We expect you to be here in the Netherlands from September 14 up until October 2nd. It's in the Netherlands, in the leading city of Europe, I would say. It's in Amsterdam. And yes, it's in Europe. Um, there's lots of places in Amsterdam to go. There are lots of hotels to go, ranging from 5-star world-class hotels and up until bed and breakfast. So if you have any questions about accommodations, feel free to ask. Well, John does all of the training, and his crew will assist him during the training, and audio and video material will be provided before the start of the training, so you can have sufficient time to prepare to become the best NLP trainer you can be. And let's be honest, there is an investment, and the usual investment is 6,200 euros. But let me be clear on it, because we always have early birds discounts, and also especially for you as the listener to this webinar. And the early bird price or investment is 5,500 euros. There's no VAT involved, so this is the price. And how can you attend? Well, actually, it's pretty simple. Just send an email to info@nlpacademy.nl with your telephone number, and we will call you right away to go over the details. And it probably takes you 10 minutes. And you're set to go for a trance. Experience of a lifetime. And in case you need any help with the accommodation, just say so, and we're happy to help wherever we can. Well, Karen asked just one more question, because out of curiosity, we always are curious what people think where the field of NLP is going. So we asked just John the question. So here's his answer.
Yes, it's going. So, John, another question. There are a lot of NLP trainers in the world. What do you think is the future of NLP, and how can new trainers distinguish themselves in the market?
And I think it's a really interesting question, and I might answer it in a way that maybe people may or may not expect. But what I would say is, I don't honestly know what the future is of NLP as a defined methodology, school of thought, set of processes where it's taught, in the format of practitioner, master practitioner, trainers training, and so forth. I think there will always be a thread there. I think there will always be a percentage of people that are interested in that. There's no question in my mind about that. What I think is, where the opportunity is has more to do with people getting this skill set and then applying it to whatever is their area of interest or their area of expertise. For me, especially with somebody who's a new trainer starting out, this is kind of the omnipresent question, the perennial question every time. People, say, well, okay, so now I'm going to be this certified NLP trainer, so am I going to go out and do certification trainings? And it's like, well, you could try. You might even succeed. It might work really well. But what I would do is I would look at how people know you already. What is the area of expertise that you have already? Because that's going to be what's going to get people's attention. That's going to be your foot in the door. And if you don't have something like that, well, then that's the thing to explore and to really, to me, it's kind of easy. If you follow something that you're really interested in, that piques your curiosity, that you're passionate about, then what's going to happen is you will end up making a unique contribution based on that, and what happens then is that your experience that you already have, or the credentials you may already have, are what gets you in the door. But then once you've got people in front of you, and then you start using the processes that we're talking about here, in the body of NLP and Ericksonian work and so forth, what happens then is that's what blows people away, because people go, I've never been to a training like this before. I've never had this kind of experience. And at that point, then, that's when you can start to introduce, well, this comes from a body of knowledge called NLP or something, and then now they're in. Now if you do want to do practitioner trainings, you have people that have had an experience of it, so they understand the veracity of it, they understand the power of it, they understand how it could be applied to their life. So for me, I see, kind of this thread that's going to be happening in NLP, but ultimately, in order for NLP to thrive, well, I should really say to survive, is there needs to be a kind of dynamic balance, and I'm not really big on the word balance, but a dynamic interaction between still recognizing what some of the classic processes are, and to maintain the integrity of that, but then at the same time not be limited by those. Not chunk, to use an NLP term, to not just keep chunking into details once we already had this bigger picture, but it's really to expand the bigger picture. It's to look outside of the field and find out what's going on, and then using NLP approaches to model whatever those things are, and all of that becomes part of a much bigger field, in my opinion. Whether that will still be called NLP as it expands, or whether it becomes kind of subsumed by other disciplines and stuff, that's the hard one. I don't really know. I know people who made predictions that was going to happen 20 years ago, and it hasn't happened yet,
Yeah,
And there's an awful lot of people that do business trainings that are teaching, in my opinion, in many cases, straight NLP, but aren't ever saying that,
Yeah.
I think it's always going to survive to an extent, but I think it's, we really need to look beyond that. We need to look at the edges of all this and see where it's all growing, and see what areas can benefit from it, and also what areas we can all explore or research, and combine whatever that new information is with what we know that might be more classic NLP processes and information.
Exactly. That will leave room for a lot of creativity in a whole bunch of other fields, which is great, of course.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the idea. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.